Well, hello, friends, and welcome to Boston.com's Cocktail Club. I'm Jackson Cannon, and soon I'll be joined by Katie Hubbard of Straight Law Bar in Brookline, Mass. Tonight, we're making drinks with Sherry, catching up on the local bar and restaurant scene, and of course, sharing with you some tips the pros use to make great drinks at home. When you registered, if you clicked through to Gordon's Wine and Spirits and got the Sherry cocktail kit, well, you have everything you need. Profits from these kits go to Off Their Plate. This is a great charity that buys meals from restaurants that need the business and distributes them to frontline workers and others in need. First, I'm going to go through everything we need, and all the while, I'm taking your questions in the chat. The ingredients tonight, you're going to need some sherry. If you got the kit, you were in luck. Beautiful bottle of La Gitana Manzanilla, awesome Listau Palo Cortado, some dry vermouth. Really quick, I got a lot of questions at registration. Hey, what can I use it? We're going to demystify it. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about which sherries you use with what. But if you've got an open bottle of sherry like I do, just grab that one and some of the other ingredients. To do the Collins, you're just going to need a lemon for some lemon juice, simple syrup, and some soda water. For the bamboo, you'll want a little bit richer Amontillado or Palo Cortado sherry if you have it, dry vermouth, orange bitters, and lemon peel, or if you're feeling really crazy, that old optional olive in that drink. Just regular cube ice that we're using, that we make out of these kind of simple little 1x1s at home, is all we need for ice. And for glassware, you know, I like something nice and tall for a Collins glass, highball glass, tall. Anything will do, but I really like to kind of focus those sparkling drinks up. And then for the bamboo, which is sometimes described as a variation on the martini, I'm going in the old V-shaped glass. I know a lot of people like coupe. Please use whatever your favorite is, but it's always a good idea to drop a little bit of ice in ahead of time. I'm just going to let these glasses keep a little bit of chill that they had coming out of the fridge. I'll dump that out and use fresh ice when we go to make a cocktail. Other tools that you'll need, I like to make a twist with a nice wide heavy duty OXO peeler, knife to cut a little slice of lemon. So if you're working ahead and you want to make your lemon juice while we're talking, just make sure you take that twist off and put it aside on your cutting plate, and then take a little tiny slice of lemon to finish off the Collins as well. You'll need a shaker. And if you don't have a metal tin on tin like this, a little Tupperware can sometimes do the trick, but you're going to have to shake that Collins up a touch. I'm going to stir my bamboo. You can do that in just about any big glass that you have. I'm going to use this specialized mixing glass that I like from 1224. You could do it in the side of a shaker if you have one, or any large, say, pint glass or something like that. It'll give you enough room to kind of stir that cocktail perfection and pour it in to your glass. To measure, I use these jiggers in the bar, 2/1 and 3/4 Just remember, everybody's got a tablespoon at home. That tablespoon is half an ounce. So if we're doing a drink that calls for 2 ounces, you just make that quick conversion to 4 tablespoons and you are raring to go. Pretty much think that covers what we need. Couple of questions that came up in the chat from registration. Anthony asked, can we use other sherries than the ones that we listed? Yes, just want to say again, sherry is a very versatile, wonderful, rich category of wines, and we can coach you a little bit how to drop different styles into different cocktails. And Jason's wondering, can we learn more about sake sometime? And yeah, heck, I love that beverage as well. And we'll take that under advisement and look in the future for a class coming up on sake. Tonight is sherry, however, and with our special guest is Katie Hubbard. She is a Boston-based interdisciplinary artist and the bar manager at Taberna d'Aro and Straight Law Bar in Brookline, Mass. She's now 10 years into a career in hospitality. Katie fell in love with wine on her travels, and she's especially drawn to the mysteries of Jerez. She specializes in new wave sherry and gin cocktails. Katie has recently been published in 86 Logic Scene and the Tinderbox Poetry Review, and when not behind the bar, can be found working on a book to be called For Nothing and No One, Not Even Myself. Like many a great bartender, she is super easy to talk to. If you can support her directly, hit her Venmo up. It's on the screen. It'll be dropped in the chat. Welcome, fellow sherry lover, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jackson.
It's so good to have you here. I love your setup.
Thank you. I got my sherry, got my Spanish wine, everything a girl needs.
It's almost like you're at the bar, but since you aren't, tell us a little bit about Bernardaro and Straight Law Bar for those who haven't been.
Bernardaro and Straight Law Bar is a wonderful neighborhood restaurant in Brookline. We're right in the Fenway neighborhood on 999 Beacon Street. We specialize in sherry and Spanish wine. In fact, we have over 300 wines, 84 of them beautiful sherries that we mix in cocktails all the time. We often pair sherry and gin together. It's an amazing combination. We do fun Spanish style gin tonics in the big goblet and bunch of tapas to pair.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to meet you there. It's funny too, when you think about the neighborhood that's in, you mentioned the Fenway, and I'm glad that you did. I think I worked in that area a lot. And on the other side of the square, headed into Fenway Park all the time. And I think one time I went there for a pregame and I sat there and I was just so blown away. I was like, this is an option, like I feel like I'm in Spain before I go to the Red Sox game, So I really encourage people to visit you there. Is there anything else that they can do to support you in these times? Are you doing cocktails to go with food to go by any chance?
Yeah, we're doing cocktails to go. So we have our wonderful goblet gin tonics with all their funky garnishes. We have our specialty craft cocktails that we make in-house per order to go. Basically any classic cocktail as well.
So listen, I'm going to break with tradition a little bit. Usually I'm really thirsty after the little introduction and I want to get right into a cocktail, but we're taking so many questions on the style. I'm just wondering if you would, because I know you have to do it over the bar in a crowded room all the time. Can you just give us the 2 minutes on the different styles of sherry and what we should be looking for to taste them as we're using them?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, there's several different styles of sherry, but there's really two schools of thought. There's the sherry that undergoes biological aging, and there's the sherry that undergoes oxidative aging. And what that really means for a consumer, for someone new to sherry, is light sherries versus dark sherries. And so they really range from the bone driest wines in the world to some of the sweetest and darkest and nuttiest. So you can really have a sherry for any type of wine drinker. The manzanillas and the finos tend to be super bone dry, really briny, sort of that air of the seaside instilled in them, sometimes chalky, sometimes a little bready. And then as you move further into more oxidative aging, you get these nuttier and baking spice aromas that really start to come out. So you can pair a sherry in a cocktail basically by matching it to your other ingredients. Do you want something that's going to bring a little bit of salt? Do you want something that's going to bring a little bit of umami or a little bit of a toastiness? Sherry has it all.
I think that gets us right to the starting point, which is a light, refreshing cocktail that we're going to use a light styled sherry in. So I love this drink with manzanilla. I'm going to use Fino today myself. And the reason is I have an open bottle of Fino and took a lot of questions on how you take care of sherry. Well, after it's open, you treat it like wine, you keep it in the fridge, you drink as fast as you can, most of it. So I just want to use it, but I also like the difference. I like to see the little differences in the different brands and the different styles in simple drinks like this. Before we go, I'm just going to take my twist off that I like on my bamboo, and just so I have it off to the side. I already juiced my lemon, but I'm also going to make a slice of garnish for this drink out of the same lemon. So I just want to do that real quick before I get started. And, this is kind of a fun one. A Collins, right? We know as a gin drink that then gets vodka in it. And then, that old lazy naming of the mid 20th century, like put tequila in it, call it a Juan Collins. I mean, it's offensive in so kind of many ways, just in terms of artistic originality. But there's a reason that I think the setup gets used so often, right? Is it's kind of a mother sauce, it's you're just sugar, lemon, ingredient, and a little sparkling water. I mean, what's not to explore about that? What wouldn't that work with, right? But when it comes to using a wine for the base of a cocktail, it might not be one's first thought. So we put it to the test, and we hope you all will us now too. So I'm just going to do very light on the sugar and lemon juice, just a half an ounce of each of a 1-to-1 simple syrup with a half an ounce of lemon juice that I just squeezed a few moments before we got started.
It's so simple. It's the perfect springtime cocktail.
It's devious though. And I can't believe we figured out we're making a lower, even lower alcohol version of it with just as much, if not maybe even a little bit more, or a different flavor at least.
Yeah.
Now we need, a generous 2 ounces. You can think of that as 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2. But I think you got to be just a little bit generous here with the base, and still know that you're drinking a wine here in your cocktail. So it's going to be definitely a low ABV. You're drinking about half a glass of wine's worth in this drink. So I'm going to put some fresh ice into my chilled Collins glass, and then put some more ice into my shaker. I don't know about you, Katie, but when I'm making drinks and I use like 3 ingredients, I'm thinking about with a 4th one maybe that's been on my mind, and I have to keep thinking about ingredients that I know I'm in trouble, right? It's like this is like a 3-chord rock song right here. You know what I mean? Like we're just gonna put a little soda on at the end and we are good to go.
So simple and beautiful. It's like you fixed the wine spritzer.
You're too kind. All right. A moderately good shake, nothing crazy. You're not trying to break up an egg. Just enough to get all the ingredients together, cold, a little bit diluted and integrated. Just love the aroma off of that right off the bat. And then we're going to pour that in here. It's just a little room to top it. And when I've built a drink like this and I top it with soda, I'm going to use my straw to, you can use a spoon to like kind of drip and drop. I'm just on my way in. I'm going to go up, down once or twice, just make sure I'm good. And then take a nice slice of lemon.
Beautiful.
And here we have a Sherry Collins. Cheers.
Cheers. Yum. So refreshing.
Incredibly refreshing. I'm just astonished at the texture. I think that was what I thought we would lose a little of. And it's light and it's delicate, but the wine like holds right up against that sweet and sour.
Yeah.
And it's impressive, and it speaks to how sherry's, how the grapes are grown, but also how the sherry's produced. That there's still so much vital minerality left for a drink like this. It's not got that punch of gin. It's not got those high tones and that alcohol kick.
Yeah.
But it's got that lingering finish of a well-made distilled cocktail made with a well-made distilled spirit. So
it really does. It's like a chalky lemonade. It's crazy that wine can do this in a cocktail.
Well, not every wine can, and I'm not, we are very much hooray for everything here. We don't say anything critical, but, imagine a wonderful French Sauvignon Blanc that you want to drink. This doesn't work the same way. Maybe that's a good time for you to just take a small note on, I'm taking a quick practical question. How much soda water in the drink? That's about 1 ounce to 2 ounces, depending on the glass you're using. It's really not like the mainstay. It's just enough to kind of give it a little sparkle. But I was going to ask you to maybe speak to a little bit of why does sherry have those attributes, or what are just a few really funky, unique aspects of the method that give it this distinctive characteristic, even for the lightest sherries?
Well, sherry, like most wines, is all about the terroir. And sherry's kind of from this magical place in the southwest of Spain called Jerez, where it has this microclimate that is totally its own. It occurs nowhere else in the world. So that being said, what this microclimate does is they grow the grapes in this chalky soil called albaritza, which imparts a lot of that sort of fresh, bright minerality we're tasting here. And sherry's aged a lot differently than typical wine. It's using something called a solera system. So the best way to envision it is a bunch of barrels stacked up on top of one another like a barrel pyramid. And what this means for the sherry is there's no vintage. Every year they fractionally blend all the wines together. So this sherry that we're tasting, your Fino, my Manzanilla, it's not from 2018. It has sherry wine as old as probably the 1990s at the very least, lingering in there. And this is what gives sherry a very smooth, very wonderful consistency.
Katie, did you have one of those aha moments when you were visiting the Soleras like I did, where it's like you realize like this Solera got started when like Abraham Lincoln was president, like it's just like this spooky, haunted connection. And it's not, it's much more the physical it is present in the taste, but the metaphysical is really present in the experience, I think, and when you get to visit, which we both obviously highly recommend, you get a sense of that, I think, when you walk those halls, barrels after barrels of these ancient, Soleras of wine. People are kind of asking for a little demystification on the simplest term, sherry, Jerez, spelled the other way. Those all three I know from my studies all appear on the label. It's a really unique part of the appellation is that those three names for the same thing in three languages. It's the only appellation that requires and does just that. Do you want to speak a little bit to what that means to people?
Absolutely. So sherry is always listed with the three languages because it's really meant for all audiences. It's a very cultural southwestern little triangle in Spain that has a lot of influence, both from the Moors from Africa and from farther north and closer to France. And so culturally, it's a very significant place. And so the reason they put all three languages on it is because they want the sherry to be in a larger market and to show all of the wonderful aspects of the different cultures that are in play.
Well, it's like it's a noble, wonderful product, but it has and many wines of their region, right, have this deep connection to the terroir and the history and being a certain way there. Sherry also has like a deeper connection to being a merchant, a bought and sold, a mercantile wine. Going back like longer than some places have been making anything, they've also been marketing. And so these relationships of like the kind of like Anglo-Spanish connection and different styles that were sold to Wellington's army at the same time that another style is being sold to Napoleon's army. I mean, that stuff, it's real, and it's all there in the history of the wines and kind of the way that they're named and used, which I think, I feel like I'm a pretty novice history buff, but that's always been sort of where I've connected with other parts of drinking culture that I think are so great. And sherry has been at that. Like, what's the story on this? Who's it for? Like, even a name like González Baez is a Spanish name and a British name because they're partners for hundreds of years, so.
And East India Solera is still called East India Solera because of the trade routes. It's
right.
one.
Well, and for bartenders, we didn't use that today. We're not using it today, but for bartenders, that was the kind of breakthrough sherry into cocktails. And that's when it's sort of like, it's like as if Taylor Swift suddenly appeared on the bodega floor. When you pass that Solera, there's not a bartender who doesn't stop saying, get a picture of me with it. Get a picture of me with it, please. It's right here. Anywho, should we take any other questions? Let's see. Hey, can you speak to not all fortified wines, but like that moment in the biological or oxidative process that fortification becomes an issue? Because I actually do think that's a story of how the wines were preserved, but it's now a big part of how they taste.
Yeah, absolutely. So what occurs in the sherry triangle is a naturally occurring yeast called flor. And so when the sherry is
spelled F-L-O-R, everybody,
yes.
Just so if you ever see that word, it's flor.
Exactly. And so that's one of those things, that's what makes sherry so special. And so in the barrel, you have this layer of wine probably taking up about 3/4 of the barrel, and then a thick layer of this fluffy stuff on top of it. And that magical substance is what makes sherry sherry. That's what the biological aging really is. Sorry, this is my roommate's cat.
Love it.
She loves sherry. What can I say? So that's what makes the styles like Manzanilla and Fino retain their terroir. That's why you taste that Alberitza soil. That's why you taste the ocean air when you're sipping on them. The difference is when the winemakers allow the floor to die off, or as we're talking about, they fortify the wine higher in alcohol so it kills off the floor. That's when the wines get these darker, nuttier colors. Like if you cut an apple and left it out, but you did it for 20 years, and then all of a sudden it's this crazy, robust beast of nuttiness and burnt chocolate and all these crazy flavors.
It's like the slowest cooked applesauce ever, you know? Well, thank you for that. This is, you know, and so that is the answer of what they do in sherry to what is a fortified wine. It's a wine that has some spirit introduced to it to affect either preservation or some other change in process. So getting some great questions about like maybe moving on to the nuttier sherries. And, you know, like you and I were talking a lot about cocktails. There's sort of, we're going to have to explain what Amontillado is, and we're going to have to explain a little bit what Palo Cortado is. But let's do it with a drink in hand. So why don't you take us through a bamboo first?
Okay, so I'm so happy to be making a bamboo for you all today. It's one of my absolute favorite cocktails, and it's one of the simplest cocktails. So we're going to be using today Palo Cortado Peninsula. I'm so glad this is in the kit. This was actually the very first sherry I ever loved. And so it holds a very near and dear spot in my heart. It's kind of like, oh, it's the intro sherry, what makes you fall in love, because it's so special. It's like vanilla and Marcona almonds. It's crazy. I didn't know wine could smell like this. And so we're going to use 1.5 ounces of our lovely Palo Cortado in your lovely mixing glass, and then a wonderful dry vermouth. So that's the thing about the bamboo is you have all these options. You can use a dark nutty sherry. You could do something with a manzanilla or a fino. You could do red vermouth. You could do white vermouth. It's totally your palate. And then we're also going to do equal parts. So that's 1.5 ounces of the Dolan dry vermouth we're using today. And then an industry favorite, some Ango orange, wonderful orange bitters. We'll do 2 dashes. And so once that's all in there, we're going to top it up with some ice, and then we're going to give it a whirl. Really just want to introduce the sherry and the vermouth to each other pretty gently. I'm going to be honest here. I left my bar spoon at the bar. I'm going to use a chopstick.
Love that.
Any spoon you have can work. You could use a metal straw, whatever you got around the house. It makes stirring quite easy.
I find a dinner knife works really well.
A dinner knife, yeah.
So it's a nice wide palette, you know, because you don't want to like ruffle the ice up too much. You just kind of want to turn this thing around until it gets diluted and cold and everything, you know.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, we figured out so many different ways to make cocktails at home this past year. You got to be innovative. All right. So once you have that nice and chilled, you're going to want to strain it. I love to use a little decorative coupe glass. It's my personal favorite. Strain it all out into your chilled coupe glass or whatever vessel you like to drink from. And then we'll take this lovely little twist we reserved from our lemon. I'm going to express the oils over that. That just means give it a little squeeze and you'll see the bubbles flare out and hit the top of the cocktail. It's beautiful. And then pop it right in. And you have your, maybe your first bamboo.
Oh. Cheers to you.
Cheers, Jackson. Thanks. Oh
my God.
I love it.
You know, so it's funny that it's kind of subversive in craft cocktail circuits, where this V-shaped glass gets ridiculed, I think, because of the pain of, what used to go slopped into it in the 80s. Even though you weren't around for that, you've got like the residual generational trauma of that period of cocktails. And but this drink really is a martini variation. It comes along about 20 years after the martini, by people who knew that drink well. And it's amazing how, like, much like a martini, it kind of proves that vermouth is really the main ingredient, not vodka or gin in a martini, right? And so I wanted to just pay a little homage to that with my subversively Art Deco glass.
I totally agree. It's not a martini without vermouth. It's just booze.
Yeah. Well, this is funny too. I knew this class was coming up, so this was very much on my mind. And so is a drink sometimes called the Adonis, that is this with sweet vermouth, or there's a big tendency to blend the vermouths, and then that's either called various things, but it's a bamboo. It's just you're splitting the vermouths. I made one to go with a steak last Saturday night, and I was like, there's not a lot of cocktails that I think sit in for a meal. This one, I mean, yeah, probably better paired with salted fish and some olives and some, seaside fare, but it hung with a beefsteak, because it's just got so much guts to it.
I mean, that makes total sense. It's a cocktail of 2 fortified wines. You drink wine with dinner, you're drinking a bamboo, you're drinking a wine with dinner.
Now, how do you feel about this other thing that I like to do sometimes I didn't hear? Dropping a little olive into this mix and letting the salt kind of like leach out into the drink, so you have a little taste at the end. Have you tried that?
Yes, that's actually one of my favorite tricks to do. I love making the garnish a little bit funkier, a little bit more fun. The lemon is so classically perfect, but the bamboo gives you so much leeway to be creative with it. So a salty olive, a tart pickle, whatever you like.
Right. Yeah, it's those kind of salty garnishes. They work in so many cocktails. Something like this that's wine based and stirred. I actually even sometimes like a little bit of something salty on my tonic. Yes. Or even in a fizzy soda like that. Couple of questions. I'll take one. Can you make this drink without the bitters? Of course you can. We like the bitters. It does a few things. It just helps, like the right amount of salt in the perfect dish. It really helps the rest of the ingredients come into their own and their full potential. But it is something that in a pinch you can do without. I think if you made me choose, I would give up the bitters before I gave up the twist. Because you're getting a lot of that same vibe from twist over the top. Here's one. Let's get into this a little bit. We've got a couple of minutes left. Amontillado, a Palo Cortado. Just tell us quickly how they come about.
Okay, so Amontillados and Palo Cortados are both amazing sherries because they undergo each style of aging. They start their life as a manzanilla or a fino, depending on where they're made, and then something happens. In the Amontillado, the winemakers purposefully kill off that floor so it starts to oxidize. So it has some of that young, fresh, linear quality of a fino, but then it starts to get a little bit golden and a little bit earthier and a little bit woodsier, which is beautiful. And Palo Cortado, my personal favorite of the styles, is this crazy, mystical, magical stepchild that no one really knows how it's made because it wasn't supposed to ever oxidize. It was a wine that was meant to be a manzanilla or a fino. And then all of a sudden something weird happened. Maybe it was in a dark part of the cellar. Maybe the temperature shifted a little bit. Something chemically was off. And then it started to oxidize anyway. And so it makes these wonderful, sometimes astringent and jet fuel-y to sometimes slippery and sweet, crazy, crazy wines that have the nuttiness and the aroma of an Amontillado, they always say, and then the body of a more bigger Oloroso.
Right. The Amontillado is like a wine the winemaker wanted to make this way. The Palo Cortado is a wine that wanted to be that way. It wasn't taking any further instructions.
Yeah, just built to live.
And then so for how are sherries and ports different? Obviously, they're from different delineated places. they have some similarities in how they're these like long-standing, long-planted, long-traded, and there's some fortification in that process. For the purpose of cocktails, maybe, where would you lean for a port instead of a sherry?
That's a great question. I suppose for a port cocktail, I would probably pair it with a darker spirit, where I tend to pair sherry with lighter spirits. Like I said before, my favorite is gin, but we've done fun sherry, vodka, spritzes, and things like that as well. And port, I think, tends to be a little bit grapier to me personally, whereas sherry tends to taste more of the earth.
Yeah, and some of the white ports, that's also still true. And I find I've done that a lot with, like, if I'm going for an alternative to vermouth with a whiskey, I might reach into Portugal, you know. That's just such a great point. Well, this has just been terrific, Katie.
Yeah.
I'm so excited I got to do this with you.
This was so fun. Thanks for having me. I love talking about sherry.
Well, let's have you back, you know, and let's, I can't wait to come visit you in person and get through the restaurant and do that stuff. So do it all in person. That's all the time we have for Cocktail Club, and love for you all to join us again every Thursday at 7. Next week, we're making non-alcoholic cocktails with Nick Pratt of Ajoko. I know most people do like a dry January or something like that. Some people take Lent off. Personally, I like to take a little time in the spring, but anytime can be the right time to skip the booze and a drink, and we're going to show you how to do that next week. Never fear, the week after that, we're back on the sauce, making bourbon cocktails before the 147th running of the Kentucky Derby. When you register, make sure you do follow the link to sign up from the sign up page for Gordon's Wine and Spirits, and pick up those Boston.com cocktail kits. You'll be supporting off their plate and getting everything you need for next week's Boston.com Cocktail Club. Thank you all so much for coming. Katie, thank you for being here.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.